And I run a little boutique coaching and consulting practice called PPL Coach. And my whole mission is to help individuals and organizations really navigate complexity and change and arrive at better business outcomes sooner, while also nurturing their collective well-being. Both of those elements are really important to me. I am I'm very involved in the Agile community, and probably that's how Tracy traced me. I love bringing this way of working and the changes that our organizations are experiencing to as many people who will listen to me. So I'm just enjoying this idea of actually having an audience to listen to what I have to share, and hopefully it lands for all of you. And you know, I work with various companies. My sweet spot is really the smaller organizations. For many years, I worked in a startup, and I feel like you all are in a phase that I experienced, and I'll bring some of my Agile experience from that perspective, because I work with also a lot of large companies. They come to Agile from a very different angle. And I think those of us who are in startups need something different, and Agile can be an opportunity to take you where you want to go from where you are as well. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to show you our agenda in a moment, but I want us to start here. I want to kind of get a sense for how much you know about Agile. And so if you can go on your phone or Mentimeter to www.menti.com and add that code up there, 48114163, and contribute a word that you think about when you think of Agile. And you can contribute as many as you like. So let's create a little word cloud here that'll give us a sense of what you know. Sprint, fast, stand up, value, flexible, nice. There's a lot of flexible there that's growing. Oh, sprint is growing too. Iterate, efficiency, being on your toes. Obvious, that's a good one. Fast, value, clear communication, release, direct. There's some roles, yes. What else is coming up? Oh, Scrum. Effortless. I don't know about that one. It should feel effortless. I agree. Coordinated. Nice, nice. So I see that innovative. I see that there's a pretty good understanding of what this Agile thing is about. And I love that you emphasize the word flexible, because that's the whole goal here. Adaptability and flexibility that this what I'm going to show you today allows. But all of these things you'll see come into play while I'm presenting the rest of this session here. So what are we going to do today? Tracy all right. So Tracy helped me kind of get a sense for what you were looking for from today's session. It's just going to be a seed. Agile is like, you know, a little door that you open the door and you realize there's many doors and windows to explore. So we said, okay, what can we do for today's session? So we're going to talk about what is this Agile thing, and you all have already a sense of it, but why? Why should we care about this? I'll give you a quick introduction to two popular methods and practices, two popular frameworks, so you can get a sense for like, how is this applied? And then what I call essential Agile. So I'm going to show you 9 areas of focus that you can pick to start putting this into practice. And then we'll wrap up. And I'm trying to reserve at least half an hour at the end for questions. So if there's something that can wait, leave it until then. But if there's something that's burning, just raise your hand and let's engage in that conversation right at that moment. Let's see what's in the chat here. Make sure I'm not losing What do you want to share? Um, oh, Tracy, do you mind if I make you co-host just in case
That's fine.
we have an issue? All right. So let's start with what is Agile and why. So some of, I want to start with this quote by, it's from one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, and I'll talk about the Agile Manifesto in a moment. And this person, Alistair Coburn, says, Agile is an attitude, not a technique with boundaries. An attitude has no boundaries. So we wouldn't ask, can we use Agile here? But rather, how would I act in the Agile way here? Or how Agile can we be here? And I want you to hold this in the back of your mind as we go through the rest of the session, because I'm going to show you some patterns. I'm going to show you some techniques, but all those things are just to facilitate our ability to be Agile. And it is really this attitude that we come to our workplaces with, to our way of being with, that we're talking about here. So I'll start with a little bit of like the history. Where did this thing come from? Why did this word even come into being? Because somebody mentioned it's obvious. And the truth is, Agile is pretty obvious. But where did this word come from? Why did it become part of our industry word? So it really originated from software development. And in the late 1990s and early 2000s, something was changing in the way we created software. Object-oriented programming was becoming a much more popular technique. And that allowed us to literally grow software. We did not have to write software where we started with enter or main and write this whole set of code, and then we had an end. And it had to be processed in that way. Now we could have modules, and these modules could link to each other. And we could create small modules that would link to each other and could do something. And then we could grow those modules, or we could add more modules and put them together. So the processes that we were using at the time did not facilitate this way of thinking, this way of growing software. And so a lot of engineers at the time were trying different techniques, different processes that were lightweight, that allowed for us to take advantage of this ability to grow software. And so 17 of them, each with their own techniques, came together in 2001, and they had a little retreat. And they were trying to find, like, what commonality did we have in all the things that we did, so that we can come up with a process that we could share with the rest of the world. And what was interesting is that they didn't come up with a process. What they realized, what was in common for all of them, was an attitude, was some set of values that allowed them to work through their stuff, take advantage of the ability to grow software in a more cohesive way. So they came up with this very, very simple document called the Agile Manifesto. And it says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing and helping others do it. And through this work, we have come to value, and they said 4 things. They've come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That individual and interactions were much more conducive to an agile way of being and working than putting a lot of emphasis on process and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration, actually engaging with the customer and understanding what their wants and needs were, as opposed to paying much more emphasis on the contract and negotiating the contract to win. And then responding to change over following a plan. So, letting us emerge. Let's be flexible as new things emerge. But then there was another statement that they made. They said, that is, while there is value on the items in the bottom, we value the items on the top more. So they said that processes and tools was still important. Documentation is still important. Contracts are still important. Following a plan is still important. However, they should be in service of the things on the top, not the other way around. And that's the whole gist of what Agile is about. I'm going to just pause there and see if there's anything, any questions that are coming up or any thoughts based on this very, very simple document. All right. So from this concept, from this high level concept of what's more important and what's in service of the thing that is more important, came a bunch of different tools and techniques and practices. And so those set of tools and techniques and practices and this concept is called Agile. So Agile is like an umbrella term. And under that umbrella, you'll see practices like Scrum that one of you mentioned. There's Kanban. Scrumban, which is a combination of Scrum and Kanban, Lean, Extreme Programming, Feature-Driven Development, Crystal. Then there's scale frameworks. If you're a much larger organization, there's a whole bunch of scale frameworks out there. And this thing on the right shows you, in essence, like what is being used in the industry as of 2019. This is from a survey that's done annually, and you'll see Scrum is quite popular. And we'll be talking about Scrum in a moment. So it is the most popular of all of these frameworks, but we're seeing actually a combination, a hybrid things emerge, which is some little bit of Scrum and a little bit of Kanban, a little bit of your own process that actually works within organizations. So a bunch of different hybrid methods follow. Kanban, and Kanban, in my view, is gaining a lot of traction and attention. And in a fully distributed world, I think it's a much more, it's conducive to our current realities. So we'll be talking a little bit about Kanban as well. So Agile and Scrum are not the same thing. Agile is the umbrella term. Scrum is just one of the ways we implement an Agile way of working or doing things. So forget, the software development piece. Like you're an organization, you might be developing some software, but you're doing much more than that, right? Does this apply to you? Does this apply to your creative process? Does this apply to your organization? And if we just change a couple words, like if we strike off developing software and change it to building businesses, and if we strike off working software to deliver outcomes, does this still apply to all of you? What do you think? Would it still make sense? Right? So I think we can take what was originally started for software development and really think about how it might apply to our larger context. And so I want, again, to ask you to keep that frame of mind. So what is happening in our world today? Like in the software development world, it was an opportunity that needed a new way of working and being, right? It was like, hey, here we can do something more with the way technology is right now. And what we're doing is holding us back. So it came from inspiration. But in today's world, something else is happening. The change is not being evoked from within. We are experiencing change from the outside. That requires us to also be flexible, to figure out how do we navigate and how do we take advantage of change. So this quote is probably familiar to all of you. It's not the strongest, but the most adaptable that survive. And so what is calling us to be adaptable today? I'm just going to put this picture up here and see your reactions. There's probably past 2015, there's probably a lot more that will make us go like, oh. And this was not that long ago. I mean, I grew up in India, and our first, well, we didn't even have a telephone in our house. We had to go to the neighbor's house to make a phone call. And the phone that I used was this. And I'm not that old, though I might look. So in our lifetime, in our portion of our lifetime, we have gone from this kind of phone to a computer in our wallets, I mean, our purses or in our pockets. Can you imagine? And it's just getting faster and faster and faster. In fact, that curve looks like this. So does anyone know a word for this curve? This type of curve? We should all be familiar after looking at COVID charts for the last 2 years. We call it, hockey stick. Yes, a hockey stick curve. We also call it an exponential curve. That means the rate of change, it's not even that it's changing, the rate at which we're changing is getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And it's almost like a vertical line right now. So how do we make sense of it when things are changing fast? We can't even keep up with the rate of change, and it's even getting faster and faster and faster and faster. Yeah, Moore's law from the technology is driving this change. And so naturally we feel a sense of like, how do we as organizations, how do we as individuals respond to hockey stick curves? And so we need new ways in which we engage. So let's see some more reality checks, and you tell me whether this is true for you. So rate of change of technology accelerating. And because of that, because we have this thing in our pockets or in our purses, we have a knowledge at our fingertips. So what kind of a consumer have you become? What kind of a customer have you become? Forget your customers. Just think about yourself. What do you think? And you can unmute yourself and share. I'd love to hear some voices too. And you become like, you think you're savvy. You know what's out there. You know your options.
Definitely more demanding.
What is it, Tracy?
Definitely more demanding.
More demanding because you know your friend just told you that on Facebook or on Instagram, or you just saw something that was really cool and you want it now because it's going to solve your problem. You probably are that kind of a customer, and you're probably experiencing customers just like that. And it's information at our fingertips that allows us to be that way. Other changes that are happening: artificial intelligence, automation, taking over anything that could be a repeatable process. Anything that can be learned is being learned by a machine. So the things that we would do as humans are going to shift. Your company is already showing that. Y'all are storytellers. I don't know, hopefully artificial intelligence doesn't get really good at storytelling. But we have sensibilities about how humans behave. What do they like? To emote it, to have empathy. And those are the things that we have to bring to the surface. Our coding will probably be done by a machine very soon. So the way in which we engage, what we engage in, is shifting. The way companies are designed is shifting. Your own organization, you don't have an office where all of you get together. You're all around the country. I'm working with organizations where the teams are all around the world. They're diverse. You have all different ethnicities part of a team. We have a shift in people wanting to be independent, have more autonomy. The gig economy is becoming much more prevalent. Millennials are taking, oh, I should see many in this room here today. Millennials are being the people who are driving these organizations. Lots and lots and lots of changes are happening. And these are lending themselves to more complex problems. And the new problems that we face need new ways in which we tackle them. If we don't, then we might end up being on the left side of this chart. Do you recognize some of the logos on the left hand side of this chart? What has happened to them?
They're gone. They failed to innovate.
Yeah, they were not able to innovate in time. They weren't in tune to their customer. And the companies on the right-hand side of this chart, you know, it's not necessarily that they're going to stay there. Some of them might be shifting to the left side. I used my first job with the company on the top left over there. That was my first job out of college. And when you think about Kodak, I think for those of us who were, you know, kind of who are old enough to remember that company, I think a smile comes to our face, don't you think? It was the Kodak moment. It kind of has had a joy associated with it. Working in that company, well, it was a great company. They had great ways in which they engaged us, the employees. We had wonderful programs for us. There was great products, great pride in the products. Innovation. I was actually part of the advanced development group. So that's where I was. And so I saw the innovation that was happening. Many actually I think Kodak and Xerox were two companies out of which from their innovation departments came many advancements in technology that have gone elsewhere, like the mouse, for example, was at Xerox. So what happened? What happened with Kodak? If they were innovative, if they were doing all of these amazing things for the employees, what happened?
They didn't pivot their services to, supply the demand of the customer, of the consumer. And it was interesting, some of the people that work with the Kauffman Foundation philanthropy out of Kansas City, we were out there a couple of years ago, and they have a big entrepreneurship division. And it was interesting because they did patent the digital camera and a lot of that stuff, but they didn't double down on it. But they still had a ton of revenue coming from it. And it kept them going for a while, but they didn't change their business model to account for it totally.
You got it. You're one of the first people who has shared that part of the story, because many people did think that they didn't go digital fast enough, or that they didn't invest in digital. Actually, they had their digital camera in the 1970s. And when I was there in mid 1990s, they were actually trying to reduce the cost of that digital camera. And their limitation was their reputation. They wanted to put out a product that looked like film, that had the same quality of what they had developed over 100 years. And that held them back, number one. Number two, they didn't want to cannibalize their own very lucrative market, which was film. They thought of themselves as a chemical company, not an imaging company or a company that created moments. They called themselves the Kodak moment, but they didn't think of themselves as creating Kodak moments, because the customer was ready for digital. And if those of you who were, again, had access to technology at that time, we were happy with 15 frames per second postage stamp videos. It was so exciting. We didn't mind waiting for the image to come up on the screen, and took 3 seconds, like, the progressive rendering, like the first set of pixels and then the next set of pixels and then the next set of pixels until it became clearer. We were happy with that. So we were ready, the company was not. And so it's really, really important for companies to realize, to be in tune with what the customer's needs are. And this is shifting at that accelerated rate. So we need to move fast. So here's the shift that's happening. In the past, when things were moving either at a linear pace or stayed constant, we could predict the future, or we thought we could predict the future. But the reality is, this is our world. You probably have heard the term a lot: VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And in this world, the future is really unknown. How do you predict a hockey stick? What's the next step in the hockey stick? Is it just the next dot, or is it way up there? And so it requires a different mindset. It requires us to go from predict and control to sense and respond. And that's what Agile is about. It gives us the tools to sense and respond. And high openness, yeah. So I have my new definition for Agile. because I think it's applicable to much, much more than just software development. I believe that Agile is a philosophy and a strategy for navigating complexity and change. And this philosophy and strategy values a few things, which is very similar to the Agile Manifesto: outcome orientation, cross-functional collaboration, customer centricity, stakeholder well-being, and adaptation through experimentation. Right? So I'm going to pause again. Thoughts, comments on what is Agile and why even pay attention to this? So I had a lovely conversation with Lene and right before y'all came in, but I'm going to ask this of the rest of you. Oh, I thought it got reset. All right, so let's go again to Menti. I have one response here, which is just random, so it's going to skew our results. But let me see if there's a way for me to reset. Oh, there we go. All right, so go to menti.com 377700081. And I want you to say, how is your organization doing in this area? So one is a nah. The middle is a meh, and 2 is a yay. So yay or meh or nah is your response. So let's see what you come up with in each of these areas. Dealing with uncertainty, minimizing time spent on wasteful features, making room for innovation and creativity, making work engaging and sustainable. I see a spelling error there, it's sustainable. Managing demand versus capacity, responding to customer needs and demands, and managing changing priorities and maintaining product quality. All right. If anybody else is still finishing up, okay, we got 12. I think we got a pretty good survey here. And somebody says, LOL. You know, so interesting that y'all are finding the results interesting. So what is surprising you here? No surprises. Patrick says no surprises.
I think for me, like, I knew responding to customer needs and demands was going to be the highest one. We're really, really good at that. We're really good at the client show and meeting them. And I knew managing demand versus capacity for where we are right now would be very low too. So it's more of what wasn't surprising to me. I'm glad that dealing with uncertainty is so high.
I know, that's pretty
yeah,
awesome.
I love that. And I love the last one too, because we talk about it a lot. Like, no matter our difficulties and the challenges we face, we always want to put out our best work and guarantee premium work, because for our clients, responding to their demands and giving them the highest quality is how we ensure our success ultimately. And then these other ones are how we do it and enjoy the process.
Yes. And y'all are doing quite well. Like it's above meh in almost every one of these areas except managing demand versus capacity. So we look at Agile from that perspective, number one. So kudos to all of you that you'll have a good thing going. And I told you that I used to work for a small company similar to yours for a few years, and I just absolutely loved it. We had a lot of fun together. We were in the same way. We responded to customer needs and demands so much that they said jump, and we said, how high shall we jump? That was not sustainable. We could not scale from that model. So we had fun and we would stay in that state for a while, and we could have stayed in that state forever. But in terms of growth, we couldn't even hire new people because the people who were there didn't have the time to be able to bring somebody else up to speed. Because we all operated from our own sensibilities. There was no set process. And because we all knew each other well enough and knew how each other worked and were proactive leaders, it worked because we figured out what needed to happen, each of us individually. But to be able to scale, we need to be able to get other people to also learn what we're doing very quickly. And that was challenging. So when we brought agile ways of working in, our founder started calling it our secret sauce because it made it possible for us to grow and scale. And it was at the time not so well known and popular, so he thought he decided to call it our secret sauce. So we kept it to ourselves for a little while. So hopefully what you'll gain out of today's session, and I hope that is just the beginning of a journey for you exploring this further. I hope that you can see what of this can you take to address some of the challenges and to balance out what it means to respond to customers' needs and demands in a way that is sustainable for you and allows you to really grow and flourish with the same sentiment that you'll all hold today. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk about a couple of the Agile frameworks. The first one I'm going to talk about is Scrum, and then the next one I'm going to talk about is Kanban. So today I'll just talk about these two because they're the most popular. And what I do is I kind of borrow from each when I work with organizations to say what makes sense in this place. And so you'll probably be able to take nuggets from these to see what applies for you all. So I'm going to start with Scrum. So somebody put in the in our words that you are aware of in terms of Agile, you added Scrum there. So what do you know about Scrum? And there's some clues on the slide, so you can steal some responses. What do you know about Scrum?
It's team driven. It's very much team oriented, and they decide what will be released at the end of each sprint. And it's actually, there's not a project manager, there's a scrum master. And the differentiation is extraordinarily different. It's something that we would have to definitely wrap our heads around. But basically we just kind of, scrum master just kind of keeps out of the way and removes impediments for the team and lets them do their thing.
Lovely. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. Anybody else would like to add? Anthony?
I've worked a little bit in agile Scrum environments in kind of a product flow where there's sort of the feature list. What is it like next, soon, and then mothballed or closet, and each person on the team takes the tickets they're going to try to kind of hit for that day. And there's also kind of estimating, like in public, estimating how much effort each thing takes and sort of moving your tickets across the line to done. Bug requests handled the same way. So it's sort of like a focus on what needs to be done and ignore some of the big backlog stuff.
It requires a very detailed system and tracking. It moves fast, it moves as a team, but it's incremental improvement, but it's constant, so you get there faster.
Yes, I think you all got a good gist of what this process is about. It's really a framework, and it's a framework that's there to solve complex problems. So what makes something complex is there's a lot of unknowns. So you don't know what you don't know, so you can't plan for it. So you have to have a process where you allow for those things that emerge to be able to be tackled. So that's what complexity is about. And so the word Scrum comes from rugby. So you'll see this little rugby team here. And so some of you might know what a Scrum is in rugby, but it's about putting the ball back in play, right? And your whole goal is for your team to kind of win by taking the ball to the goal post, I guess what's called. So the team comes together in a huddle to put the ball back into play. And in Scrum, there is an event that happens where the team comes together to figure out what are they going to do for that day. They're kind of putting the ball back in play. And we call that the daily Scrum. So it comes from Scrum. And from rugby. And in rugby, you know that everybody on the team is kind of an equal. You don't have a certain status for the team members. They're all collectively there to win the game. And so similarly in a Scrum team, the team, Tracy said, is team oriented, very team oriented, and the team has equality among the members of the team. They all are contributing to winning the game. So that's a little bit about Scrum. So it's a really good framework for complex products or anything that involves complexity, because we work in little chunks. We do a little bit of planning, we do a little bit of doing, and then we do a little bit of learning. And then we go in the cycle. And from that little bit of doing and what we learn, we figure out what we need to plan next. And there's things that emerge in the moment. We realize, oh, that's what we learned. This is how we can adjust our next plan. It's very lightweight. So when you look at it, you'll be like, this is easy. We can put it into practice. But probably Tracy and many of you who might have tried it know the challenge lies in the fact that we have people putting the process into practice. So all of us have to change, have to shift the way we engage with each other, the way with the discipline that we build in order to be able to work in this way. That's the part that's difficult. The framework itself is not that difficult, but I'll show you a little bit of that framework. So Scrum is built on these 3 pillars of empiricism. So empiricism, things that we have to kind of adapt as things emerge in the moment. And those 3 pillars are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So if you think about Scrum as the top of the stool, these are the 3 legs of the 3-legged stool. So that you know what happens to the stool if one of those legs is missing. So we need transparency, meaning that the team that's working on the stuff has to make their work visible to everybody else so that it can be inspected. So you'll see how the work that needs to happen is visible. The progress is visible. The finished product is visible. The way we work is made visible. And on the other side, those who are in leadership, in a positional leadership role, are making transparent and visible what are the priorities? What's our vision? What's our mission? Who of our customers do we need to pay attention to right now? What is our strategy? So they make that visible and transparent. They make the outcomes of the organization transparent and visible so that everybody else can inspect and adjust accordingly. So that's transparency. So the transparency allows inspection. So if I can see things, I can now look and see what's going on. Is something going well or not? And I can adjust. So I can use that inspection to adapt. And so all of these things go hand in hand to make better outcomes possible. What happens if we have transparency and inspection and no adaptation?
Nothing ever improves.
Yeah, you're stuck.
Yeah.
You're stuck. So make sure that we include that as well. So let me give you a little quick intro to the Scrum framework. So just like any other project or any other product, things start out with an idea. And traditionally, we took that idea, and if that idea was worthy of investment, we asked somebody on the team to go collect some requirements and put it in the long requirements document. Traditionally, in traditional organizations, they call it a BRD, or business requirements document, and it has all kinds of stuff in there, and very, very long. And a few people sit down, or maybe one person sits down and writes this thing up, and then hands it over to the team that's going to do the work. And that team goes off and interprets this document and creates something. And then after a while, they bring the finished product to the customer. And the problem with that was that many times the customer said, this is not what I asked for, or I don't need it anymore, or like, what is this? And then the person who probably wrote the document said, this is not what I wrote. You interpreted it wrong. All kinds of dysfunctions happen. Probably not in your organization, because maybe you don't even work in that way. So what Scrum does is says, okay, we have this idea. Let's shift our focus and think about who is the person who's going to benefit from this? Who's the user? Who's the customer? What do they want? And captures their wants and needs and desires in a list, almost like a shopping list. That list we call the product backlog. And that list might have little things and they might have big things. And this list is ordered, taking into account what might be the most valuable to the customer, and taking into account some risks that might be present among the things that have been requested. Maybe some things need to happen sooner. Maybe there's some dependencies that makes certain things need to happen sooner. So it's an ordered list. And there's a team that works on this ordered list. But they don't go off and take this whole ordered list and go to a room and kind of finish it, create the end product. They work in time boxes, and the time boxes are called sprints. The sprint can be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. Most organizations choose a 2-week sprint. For your organization, I think things probably move so fast that you might want a 1-week sprint. So in that 1-week sprint, you're going to come up with an increment of the final result, a version of the finished product, or a piece of the a finished piece of the final product as the increment in this 1-week time period. So to do this, the very first thing the team does is gets together to say, okay, from this product backlog, what can we do in this next 1 week? What's our goal for the next 1 week? And they create a plan. That plan will be like a small subset of the product backlog that they think that they can accomplish based on their capacity. And they'll put together a more detailed plan, like who's going to do what? What are we going to do? What are the exact tasks that are involved? And once they have that plan, that becomes the focus for the 1 week. And the team gets to work. And every day they huddle and they say, okay, how are we doing on the plan? Did anything new emerge? Is somebody stuck? Or are we on track? And if they're on track, they just continue. If there's something that they're stuck, then somebody on the team with the assistance of what Tracy mentioned as the Scrum Master special role helps remove that blocker and keeps the work moving. And they're tracking down how they're doing towards that work every single day. At the end of that time period, on the end of the time box, they review the work, the finished product, not a document about the product, not a plan about the product, but the actual version of that product. And ideally, they might even bring the customer in to say, here's what we have so far. Do you have any feedback for us? Do we need to adjust? Or it might be an internal stakeholder that provides that input. And then that is fed back into the product backlog. And the team also decides to come together and figure out how they work with each other. How was their communication? Was it effective? Did they finish all the things that they took in? Did they take in too much? Do they need to take in something less later? Can they make the way they communicated what they needed a little more effective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they might take 1 or 2 changes and incorporate it into the next sprint. And this just continues as they grow the product. And they might come to a stage somewhere in the middle, which says, oh, we have it in a good enough state that we can give our customer this version and they can start using it. And we can continue to evolve it and make it better and better and better over time until the customer says, I'm good enough, it's good enough, and we pause. Now, Scrum, unlike any other Agile framework, has introduced some new roles. So we have a Scrum Master who basically facilitates this whole process. They make sure that the planning is happening and the daily Scrum is happening and the review is happening in the retro. They're making sure the team is communicating and collaborating and coordinating with each other effectively. They're making sure that this backlog is ready for the team. They're working with the product owner on that. They know Scrum so well that they're teaching the rest of the organization and helping the organization absorb this way of working. Then we have the product owner. The product owner is the person who owns this backlog. They prioritize it. So they are very in tune with the customer and the business so that they know what the team should work on first. So their whole accountability is maximizing the value that's delivered by the team. And then we have the team itself. The Scrum framework calls them developers, but they're really the cross-functional team. So in your case, you might not have developers, but you might have artists, content creators, story writers, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the people who are actually making the thing real, creating the final product. So that's it, the Scrum framework. It has 3 roles, 4 events, and 3 artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and an increment of the backlog. That's it. Okay. So if we want to bring it into simpler language, some elements that you'll see here: small, self-organizing, cross-functional team, time boxes. Everything is time boxed. Planning is time boxed, review is time boxed, the whole event is time boxed. There's a prioritized backlog, so any prioritization issues are taken care of right there. Just-in-time planning, so we don't create the whole plan right from the start. Just before we're actually ready to work on an item, we go into the detail and plan it. We work in small batches with this close collaboration. There's feedback loops, incremental delivery. Hopefully that leads to delighted customers, and iteration. And then, of course, we're inspecting and adapting. These are some key concepts that are part of the Scrum framework. So here's if you think about in non-Scrum terms, we have a to-do list, a target goal, we have a team huddle, we check the results, we celebrate and improve. From that, we get an intermediate outcome that all works towards an overall outcome. Good? All right. Any thoughts, questions about the Scrum framework?
I think for me, the only thing and this isn't something I need you to answer, but it's just something I'm thinking about is, Patrick and I are talking as we're following along and everything, is part of this works really well and we execute on something like this on one of our clients. It's 202. But then how does it ladder up to clients who are more on the services end, who really like that kind of white glove ability to go like, hey, we need this right now. And we go, okay, great, we'll work on it right now. So I think there's,
so you can't even plan for 1 week?
No. So like trying in my head to see like, does we know we can apply it to hard product work that has good planning and clients that behave in that way, but other clients who pay us a lot of money who need sort of that really white glove treatment, who I think they thrive internally on kind of that manic, messy desk, like, don't worry, I'll get it all. So I'm just sort of looking for sort of like
Yeah.
through lines or things to
How
pull
do you
on there with
change a
them.
client's processes and culture in a services-based model when we're not a product-based model? And
Yeah.
is it possible to change an external organization to align with your methods? Or should we think about Scrum, and this is my theory, and the flexibility it provides us to adapt our systems to manage them better, right? Because we're never
Yes.
going to be able to change them.
Yes. So I'll tell you what actually, because we were in the same place in that startup company that I was in. So we actually developed the back end APIs that another set of companies would consume. And then so the end customer was their customer. And they were ours. So we were like the back end, of them using what we created to work with the front facing customer. So they had a lot of strain and stress on that. And so we had started adapting Scrum, and they were in a similar way. We'd get like requests via email and via phone call. And we couldn't really assess if the phone call was more important than something else that they had asked us before, or it was just like another way of them communicating. So we just assumed the phone call was more important or the email was more important than something that they'd done before, and we would go off and reprioritize. And when we gave it to them, they were like, why didn't you just do what we asked you first? Like, oh, we thought that you were trumping what you were saying. So we needed better communication. So what we did was we helped them see our process. So we said, we are using Scrum, and we used to do 3-week iterations. So we are using Scrum. We plan out 3 sprints ahead, and we figure out like our roadmap, right? Our roadmap was 3 sprints. And so in those 3 sprints, what were we planning to do? And we would get input from each of these customers, because also we did not want our customers to know that we had many customers. We wanted them to feel like they were our own exclusive customer. So we had to treat each of them separately, right? So with each of them, we asked them, give us your top 5 priorities. And we had a list that they could maintain. So as long as we did not pull the item from your priority list, you can change your priorities at any time, so that when we go look there, we know what are your next most important things. Each of the customers had to do that. Then we would do our own internal assessing, because sometimes the customers, 2 or 3 customers, really wanted the same things or a slight variation of the same thing. So we could get a bigger bang for our buck if we implemented something that would actually benefit more than one customer. So we had to do a little bit of strategy there. But we always let them know what was coming up next and give them a timeline. If you need to change, like if something is coming up for you that's really important, let us know, because otherwise we're going to next implement this set of features, if you will. And once we take it in, it's very disruptive for us if we have to change priority. And if we have to change priority at that time, we will have to take out something that you asked for before, for now. And we would have, so we had these regular conversations with them. We responded to their needs. So like if they had a customer demo and they needed us to work a little bit faster, we understood the reason for why they were making a priority change or why they were asking us for something. And so we worked with them in partnership to figure out how we could implement it, but that they would have to give up something which they might have asked for before. That relationship shifted everything for us. They became our partner. They realized where we were stuck. They realized what they needed to tell us so that we would respond in a way that made most sense for them. So this, my exact story might not apply to you, but maybe it gives you some ideas of what you might consider doing. But I'm also going to show you the next set of techniques called Kanban. And the Kanban allows us for a little more frequent response to customer requests. And so if there are little requests, you can employ Kanban. And you might want to think about a blend of Kanban and Scrum to be able to accommodate all the kinds of work that you do. And, you know, if there's an interest in that, we can talk about that another time. All right.
I would actually ask definitely to save some time for prioritizing and creating a pipeline of things when there's a lot coming in, like that, sort of focusing on next and then future stuff, because I feel like that prioritization of tickets could still work in those panic kind of high service scenarios.
Yes. So let's see how Kanban might help you all in your organization. So Kanban is really a strategy for optimizing flow. So when these things come in, it shouldn't be a panic. How can we nicely absorb them and let them flow to done? So not only these new requests that are coming in, but anything that, like Anthony said, little more strategic stuff that you'll have a little more thought put into it and a flow of that work. So how do we do this using this Kanban? Kanban helps you optimize that flow, and it does it through a visual pull-based system. And I think that you're already implementing some element of this at your company. So let's see how to think about it from a very, you know, academic way, you know, in a sense, what is going on here in Kanban. So in Kanban, what we do is visualize the work and visualize the workflow. So this is a very simple Kanban board. So everything that comes in is like to do, what needs to be done next, in progress, and done. If you have a different process, you might just expand it. So if you have like analyze the request or triage the request and then do some work and then validate it and then done, then that would be your flow. So whatever it is for your company, you're going to visualize the flow. Each column represents a state of that workflow. And then you have the work itself. And the work is a card that moves in this workflow. So some request that comes in is this card that moves in the workflow. So unit of work. Each unit of work creates some value. So it might be you know, a variation of the story that you're creating, or it might be a visualization of the data, but it individually creates some value. The most important thing about Kanban is that there is a WIP limit, a work in progress limit, for either each column or for the system. This builds the discipline to get the work flowing, and it also creates what we call a pull-based system based on how much capacity is actually available. So an example of this would be, say, you know, right now the work in progress limit is 2. Though we have 3 things in the to-do column, until one of these things is done, nobody can pull an item in from the to-do column. It forces you to start finishing stuff and not just keep on starting new things. You can also have what we call classes of service. So you can see that there's sometimes something that you just have to forget the WIP limit and just do. An expedite lane. But this expedite should be reserved for truly emergency situations. Because if you use it for any time a customer says jump, then you don't have a system at all, because everything will be expedite. Then everything becomes meaningless. But if it's an expedite, you can temporarily pause the work in progress limit to move this through the system. And maybe the team swarms, or a couple people swarm on getting this done. And then you can have other things. So you know, when we have here, I've put fixed delivery versus maintenance, but you can have more strategic work versus things that are emergent. Requests that just come in from the customer, and you can make it visible about how many are in each. You can put WIP limits to say, okay, at any point in time, we're only going to have this many maintenance and this many fixed delivery. And we have to have the discipline of finishing it before we pull something else that's new. Kanban allows you to change priorities much more frequently. So the shorter your WIP limit, the smaller your WIP limit, the more control you have on priority changes, right? Because you only have 2 currently working in the system. So when one of them is done, you can actually move the next most important thing into the system. So we call these classes of service. So this is Kanban, very, very simple. Now you can use Kanban and add in a review meeting every month or every week or every 2 weeks. You can use Kanban and have a daily huddle to move things along. You can use Kanban and introduce a retrospective on a certain cadence. So while Scrum gives you all that structure very tight, Kanban allows you to add the structure based on what you want. Does that make sense? So Lene says she does the same. It's not always based on priority though. So what Patrick and Mike can help do is help other people make decisions about how to prioritize, which customer to prioritize, what outcomes is our organization looking to do right now that you should prioritize. So that's again the transparency. When you provide that, the rest of the people can help make their decisions much more effectively. And the system allows you to have the discipline and the area where you say demand versus capacity. This is what allows you to manage demand versus capacity. Because otherwise you're just stuffing things into a system that actually cannot absorb it. And you create probably a lot of stress and anxiety for people. So something to think about there. So with Kanban, we are optimizing 3 things. We're optimizing for efficiency, predictability, and effectiveness. We're not maximizing efficiency. We're not maximizing predictability. We're trying to get the best of all 3 of those things. And when you're able to get the best of those 3 things, would it be pretty awesome for you all? Right. So we're actively managing. There's a lot behind Kanban as well, but we're actively doing things to support getting all these 3 to the best of our ability. So any questions, thoughts, comments about Kanban?
So how can you have, all right, so if we use Kanban on each project, and then could we also roll those into a Kanban for the entire organization to prioritize the project work across people?
Yeah. So I prefer a Kanban board for a group of people. So you would still have a team, and the team can have work that's coming into the team. So with Agile, we don't have the people going to the work. We have a group of people working, and the work comes to them. So this group of people who might be involved in, you might be organized by a customer, or you might be organized by products. Maybe you're handling more than one product. All of the work related to you is coming to you. And you're maintaining one board so you can see all of the work that you have to do in one place. Okay. Now, you're right in that at the higher level, you can have a Kanban board for what's happening to, you can have a Kanban board about your customers. You can have a Kanban board for your products. You can have a Kanban board for your projects as to what state is it in, and have a higher level view of what's happening with them. It's a different workflow, and you're capturing it at a different level of granularity.
So what Patrick just said, we don't have dedicated teams that only work on specific clients or projects. They cross over and we remix the teams. So that's where it gets difficult to prioritize. Yes.
It gets difficult to prioritize, it gets difficult to manage, it's difficult to be committed, it's difficult to stay accountable. Yeah. So that is one of the big things that you can do to help a group of people for a period of time to have focus on a set of things. It could be where they are tackling 5 customers, but all of their work at any point in time is visible and focused in one place. That makes it manageable. Otherwise, how do they know what to prioritize? For everybody, their project is important. For every customer, their product is important. So we have to facilitate people being able to make consciously good choices and having all of their work visible in one place allows them to do that.
I have a question. Oh, sorry,
Go ahead,
Patrick.
Matt.
A question on prioritization and also kind of looking back on the incremental goals on the Scrum piece. But is there like a particular formula that's used to typically, figure out what that prioritization is, like time spent times complexity of the task times resources, required, etc.?
So we typically have two factors. Basically, what you want is to maximize the value of each work that you're creating. And that takes into account two things. How much value does it create for your business or for the customer? You need to be able to articulate that. And somebody who has knowledge of the business and the customer can articulate that. And that's why I'm saying the input from whoever is in a positional authority to say, what's the strategy for your organization? That's a factor that you take into account when we think about value. The second factor is how much effort is this going to take? And the return on our investment is value divided by effort. That's the formula. Now, you might want to take into account sometimes there's things that we do that are time sensitive. So there's another formula, I won't go into it today, but there's another formula where you can take time sensitivity as a factor. And if you're doing things for reducing risk or optimizing for the future, it might not be giving you value immediately from a business perspective or from a customer perspective, but it is giving you value for the future. You're making an investment. So there's another formula that takes that into account, but always the value were divided by effort. Any other question?
Yeah, I think it's interesting and something that Mike and I have talked about a long time. And a true agile framework in our organization, it has to be highly flexible, and that's what I like about agile is that it's not a constraining, it's a framework, right? It's not a constraint. It's not saying you have to fit into this box. It's how to think. And in thinking about our capacity, resource, and issues, there's really two options with individuals on project teams that don't overlap with other individuals on project teams but are mixed. It's either one, appointing essentially a cross division, so for our various teams, video design, development, etc., point lead that's effectively a resourcing manager, scrum master of the team, so that they can prioritize things in a very clear way, coming from one centralized location, but shared with those other project managers from the lead to help prioritize it with nuance. And or you could only have people working with the same people on projects. So if team A, project A is a particular team, then project B, it's the same exact team, and therefore it allows that workflow to occur. The problem with that is in a small organization like ours, that different projects require different skill sets, right? And it's important that we also have a culture of growing our skill sets and capabilities individually and as a team. And so the second is a lot harder to impossible, but the first is possible, and it follows in the Agile framework. And I think we love your feedback as we implement stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I always think of things as an experiment. So experiment with it, but first know what outcomes you're looking for. Experiment, see whether it gives you those outcomes. Otherwise, you need to adjust. But yeah, I would be happy when you're there to kind of give you some thoughts from my experience. Okay, so a little check to see whether you're all awake. Different code here, 22080312. Are these core practices of Scrum or Kanban? So just based on what you heard. are these terms attributed to Scrum or Kanban? So based on our collective intelligence, if you look at the where they're skewed, we are collectively right. Some of you have chosen a different response. I'll be curious to hear a couple. So product owner, in Kanban, there's no new roles. Now you can introduce a product owner, but Kanban does not require it at all. Work in progress limits. So somebody who said work in progress limits is also a Scrum thing. What do you see? Why did you pick that?
I picked it because work in progress limit, because on a Scrum team, you have key feature sets that you're going to deliver at key points in time, and it constantly builds, it constantly iterates, and you want to achieve these incremental steps. So that's how I interpreted WIP limit.
So work in progress limit is that how many can be active at any point in time. And Kanban is very particular about that. So we say 2 things inactive or 5 things or 10 things. Now Scrum, it's good that you put that in there because Scrum does have a WIP limit. We call that our velocity. So each sprint, the team actually is able to deliver a certain amount of work. You'll notice that if a team stays stable, over time, you'll notice that each time box, they're able to do a certain amount of work so that we can plan for that amount of work. So their focus, their sprint goal, the focus for the 1 week is limited. And so we can think about work in progress limits in Scrum as well, but it's not very obvious. Like in Kanban, it's very obvious. And about visualizing the workflow, in Scrum, we often do use a board as well. It's not a requirement. There's nothing in the Scrum guide that says that. So we almost borrow that from Kanban. In Kanban, it is an essential element of Kanban where we're visualizing the workflow. So there's a little nuance there as well. And then the other things, you can introduce them in Scrum, but they're part of, so you can introduce them in Kanban, but they're part of Scrum. Retrospectives are part of Scrum, planning events, and time boxes. In Kanban, there's no time box. You finish when you finish, but we do try to make our cycle time shorter. We try to shorten our cycle time. That's our goal, to improve our efficiency. But it doesn't say that you have to do, in Kanban, it doesn't put a limit to say, okay, we're trying to get to this in 1 week or 2 weeks. We might have a service level expectation based on our history of cycle time, but it's not a requirement. Okay. All right, so let's quickly look at what's different. And I think that now you're going to kind of getting a gist of this. So what is different from how we did things traditionally? So traditionally, we have what we call the iron triangle. So if anybody is a project manager here, you know this very well. We created a plan, and we needed to stick to the plan, and that plan had a certain scope, a certain amount of time by which we needed to accomplish it, and a certain budget. And we try to stay in that. And that's fine if nothing changes. But the reality is there's always something that changes. And then we would still try to cram it into this iron triangle. And often quality suffered as a result of it, or we had burnt out people. And so with Agile, recognizing that we want to adapt to things that are happening, we want to be able to respond to changes, we want to take a different approach where something needs to be flexible. Now, what needs to be flexible? Well, it depends. But either the scope needs to be flexible or the time needs to be flexible if changes happen. And so most of the time, we have time that is firm, and we figure out what scope can we deliver by that time. That's typically the way, but there might be situations where the scope is fixed, in which case if new things emerge, then we need to extend the time by which we can deliver. And this keeps focus on making sure that we're delivering what the customer wants in a high quality way. And so we need to partner with the customer to help them understand that as well. So again, another shift is in a plan-driven method. This is from a software development perspective. For what the work that you all do, it might be slightly different. But in software development, after the requirements are done, the team does an analysis, then they design everything, then they do the work, and then they do verification or testing, and they roll it out for the whole entire project. And often something slips here, and it slips, and then the things that get squeezed are this verify stage, and we take shortcuts which come to bite us at the back end. Now, what does Scrum do? What does Agile do? Is that we break it into time boxes called sprints. And in those sprints, the little increments that we do still go through this process of analysis, design, build, etc., but just for a really small little thing. And we might do that for a few small little things in this time box. And at the end of it, what comes out is something that we can review and get feedback on, or it might be in a state that we can actually roll out and deliver. And the feedback that we get feeds into the next one and the next one and the next one. And if we work on the most valuable things first, even when the deadline hits, what we have is some finished pieces that we can roll out, as opposed to being somewhere over here, where we have a bunch of things that have been built but not verified. So that's the big shift. We call it iterative and incremental. And let me show you what that looks like. So if we think about painting the Mona Lisa, we could approach it in this way, where we are painting portions of the Mona Lisa. But if we take this approach, when are we actually able to give something to the customer and start earning something from our product? What stage? 5, right? And in this approach, we probably need to know what the Mona Lisa looks like right from the very start. We need to be clear on the end picture. But many times we don't know what the end picture looks like. It just comes up as we're working through this, especially when it's creative work. I'm sure that you work with your customers and they have a kind of an idea of what they want, but they cannot articulate it clearly. And so what do? In this case, for example, if somebody went to Leonardo da Vinci and said, I want a picture of a woman in a pastoral setting. And Leonardo da Vinci, the first thing that he would do if he was a smart artist would be to draw a sketch and say, is this what you're looking for? And the customer would give some feedback and say, I see that you're covering her mouth. Why that? She looks like she's smoking a cigarette. And there's the hills in the back. I was thinking more pasture. And Leonardo da Vinci would say, not a problem. I'll be back tomorrow. And comes back with a new sketch, having incorporated that feedback. Again, cheap, fast. And so now the feedback has been incorporated hands down, and pastures in this back. And the customer says, I like it. This looks like what I want. Can you add some color? Now, if the customer, like a blonde Mona Lisa, this might be what the Mona Lisa would look like. Or if the customer lived in South Beach, Florida and had Art Deco style, Mona Lisa might have been exactly like that. But in this case, the customer said, I was thinking of a slightly darker look. I imagined dark hair and no problem. And in this case, the customer actually said, I really was thinking for it. I like everything. I'm thinking, can we get a real person kind of look? I was thinking maybe for my Italian villa with a gold frame. No problem. Which stage could you start earning some money?
One.
Maybe even one, potentially. But I don't know if somebody would buy just a basic sketch, but it's possible, especially like if Leonardo da Vinci already had a very high reputation, then his sketch would also be valuable. But say he was an unknown artist, when could he start selling some of his stuff? I would say at least three, right?
Yeah.
And then he could go further and further and further. The customer, when could they get some confidence in Leonardo da Vinci? Right at one. The customer could have seen at one or two, like, is this person
When they
the
talk to him.
artist for me? Yeah, or when they talk to him, yes. When they talk to him. Ideally, when they talk to him, so that's even earlier. But
Yeah.
the early stages are feedback. You're learning about the customer, you're learning what the customer likes, and then now you can incorporate your learnings to make them really, really happy and delighted customers. And in this case, you don't need to know what the end product looks like. The end product emerges based on feedback. We call this iterative and incremental. This is Agile. Make sense? And so there's a shift, and this is what we're talking about, Patrick, in terms of like before we had these functional groups, and we had to manage these functional groups. And maybe we had a coordinator, a project manager that's saying, okay, I need 2 of you, 1 of you, 50% of you, 10% of you, and then they're like managing, coordinating. When in Agile, and particularly in Scrum, we say, okay, let's put a team together that's capable of doing something. Our typical core output from our organization. And let's make it a cross-functional team where we have all these different people that together, they can come and create something for our customer. And they can talk to the customer, they can understand the customer well. They have that knowledge among them. They can prioritize their stuff. And then we have this product owner, Scrum Master that support either the representation from the customer, and the Scrum Master is coordinating everything. This is a big shift. And and what facilitates this is team members sometimes learning a little bit of what other people do. And so they might not be the expert in it, but they can move the work along and not be dependent on somebody else. Now, if you have some really, really core experts, have them be floating consultants. The team hires them to either teach them how to do something, or, which is better, or be able to do a little piece for them. So they would actually book their time in a sprint that says, can you please come for sprint 2? I need you in sprint 2 to do this. So that's one way to handle this. It'll take a little bit of time for you to think about this experiment, but I would encourage you to try this experiment.
What's your opinion on the amount of context switching that would occur in a moment where, okay, you're going to help on this particular thing, them not having the background and alignment from the beginning, and how difficult it would be to fit into a team, that is very aligned into the vision and culture and understanding of the subject matter, which can be fairly complex, to getting somebody in there without that switching costs has a high value.
Yeah, you have to make that trade-off decision. It's like an investment Sometimes it feels like slow down to go faster, because that initial investment will allow you to go faster in the future, but it is an investment. So think about how much investment, like should the investment be little, 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 little? Do you want to make a big investment at one point and then, accelerate? Try in a little pocket, try one sample, see how it works, learn from that, and bring it to others. So here's kind of a big picture view of how things are different. So in planning, requirements were upfront. Now it's iterative and continuous. Development used to be in phases. Now it's iterative and incremental. We're doing that every week. Delivery, it used to be all at once. Now it's incremental value. Change requirements, it used to be, and you might not experience this at all, but in large organizations, there's a change request and you have to get approval. Whereas in Agile, change is welcome. We go from functional teams to cross-functional teams. We do a lessons learned or a post-mortem in the past. Now we do continuous improvement. Every week we're figuring out how do we get better, how do we get better, how do we get better. And then with quality, used to be inspection after the fact, and in Agile, quality is built in. So we're testing and we're validating all the time as we go along. Now, what you might recognize is this, which is planning, little or nothing. Development is always continuous. Delivery, reactive. Changing requirements, uncontrolled. Teams, everybody's wearing many hats. Feedback, nothing formal. Quality, limited quality. You don't experience the last one. But in our organization, I put this list from the startup that I was in. And some people do this and they think they're agile. There's a word for this. It's called ad hoc or chaos. So what is beautiful is that for organizations that are startups that are actually many times in this place, for them to come to Agile is a small jump. All you need is a little bit of structure. And don't lose your adaptability, your customer centricity, how you are as a cohesive organization. So try not to lose that. Just put enough structure to give you scalability. But large companies have to go all the way from here. They have to cross this huge path to get here. So you're already much, much ahead of the struggles of many organizations. So I'm going to skip this because I think we got a sense for where you all are at, whether you're traditional or agile in some of these areas. And I'm going to take us through this last set of slides. It's like, okay, I think you'll get a sense for like, what are some things we can do? But I put together 9 essential agile opportunities. And so maybe these are your experiments that you might want to incorporate over time. The first one is begin with the end in mind. So some of you might be familiar with Simon Sinek's start with why. Always start there, right? So and also think about what is the outcome that I want? What does the customer want? Start there, start with why. And align your strategy and work to outcomes. What is the outcome you want to create? Prioritize the customer, which you're already doing, which is awesome. And then work towards concrete goals, like what you'll want to accomplish. Everybody's aligned to kind of move towards that. So that's the first one. And I think that this one you probably already have mostly in your pocket. Number 2, know your customers. Yay, I think you got this one in your pocket for the most part too. So know what's valuable to them. Anticipate their needs. Get to know them so much that you surprise them by how much you know them. Engage them in co-creating the solution. So like the example that I told you about, share your process with them. Figure out how can you together make it work for both. And then get their feedback early and often. I think this one is also, from what I'm hearing, y'all are in a really good place here, where you might further experiment is deliver value frequently. How are y'all doing in this area? Do you feel you're delivering value frequently?
Right now, it's different on different projects.
Yeah. So here's some ways to do that. So break things down into small pieces. And each piece is a valuable piece, and you can get more flexibility in terms of delivering value. Create aggressive mini deadlines. So like a Scrum process is creating these mini deadlines. Limit the work in progress. This is what creates the discipline to get things to done. Because many times we start too many things and then the context switching happens. But if you're focused on a few things at a time, it allows us to not context switch so much and actually build efficiency. And then deliver iteratively and incrementally. So are there opportunities for you to come up with a version of whatever you're creating that brings value to the user, knowing that there's still more to go and still opportunities to improve for them. Number 4, self-organize into multidisciplinary teams of those cross-functional teams. And one way to do it is to organize around fulfilling a customer need. So maybe it's a project for a customer. Now, you don't have to necessarily keep that team as a team forever and ever, but for a good period of time, when you keep that team, you'll be able to become more predictable and consistent, and the team knows how to work with each other. Welcome diverse ideas. You want your teams to represent your customers. So who are your customers? Can you have people on your team that look like your customer, that think like your customer, that have had lived experiences like your customer? You're likely to create better products for them. Minimize and eliminate handoffs. And so, Patrick, this is the one thing that happens when you have those functional teams where you do have somebody who's coordinating their work, but it feels like a handoff from one team to another. And a lot of our work is not where something is completely done and we send it to another group. It probably goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that becomes a struggle if you don't have cross-functional teams. And then collaborate across individuals, teams, and divisions. So where you actually come in, when if you have these small teams working and are focused on a particular customer, you still need these teams to talk to each other because there might be dependencies among them. They might need to leverage each other's skills and expertise. So make sure that there's something that allows for that coordination to happen as well. Number 5, make work visible. This is a small one that has high impact. This is the transparency part. So visualize the work, visualize the workflow, everything that you do, make it visible, because then you'll understand where's the time going. If you feel like a problem between demand and capacity, there's invisible work that you're not realizing. So make it visible. It will make all the difference. Flag and track impediments. Put a big red sticky on the thing that's stuck so that you pay attention to it and move it. And then maintain parking lots for ideas that don't need, can wait. You don't want to lose track of them, but sometimes they can derail a meeting, they can derail a project. So maintain like a parking lot or a fridge or a freezer or whatever you want to call it. Number 6, be intentional about priorities. So this is the Eisenhower matrix, a prioritization matrix. And I heard these words expressed by some of you before. Really try to understand what is important and not important. What is urgent and not urgent. So which is the best of this quadrant to try to be in? Of these 4 quadrants, where do you want to be?
Important, not urgent.
Important, not urgent. This way you can plan your stuff. You can have a sustainable pace. Which one do you want to make sure that you're throwing out the door?
Not urgent, not important.
Not urgent, not important is quite easy to identify.
Oh,
and
I mean,
throw out. Right. So this is true. You want to avoid that. So, but it's easier for us to do that. The problem area is this one. It's urgent. It's really not important. And this is where we trip. So, I love that you were saying that you're marking things as urgent, important. That's good. Maybe you can even use this terminology to know, hey, this thing needs to actually be thrown out the door or figure out a way to improve. And if anything, and monitor the things that are urgent and important, and see how you can make them not urgent and still important. Because this is where, if you spend a lot of time here, then the things that are important but not urgent, like planning and prevention and maintenance work, goes to the back seat. So pay attention to this. Think about the 80-20 rule. So many times 20% of our work gives us 80% of value. And if you're able to identify those, you'll be in a good place. Balance short-term and long-term. Think about both. Stop to think, is it urgent and important? And or is it you ain't gonna need it? That's Yagni, or you ain't gonna need it yet. And something can go further down in the backlog. And determine the last responsible moment. So when is that moment after which things become too expensive? So maybe recognize when that time is when you need to actually act. If you act too early, you might be creating waste. If you act too late, you might be in trouble. So what is that good time to do something? For example, the best time to buy a plane ticket, the last responsible moment to buy a plane ticket is? Anybody? When is the last responsible moment to buy a plane ticket?
Before you hop on the plane.
That's the last possible moment. And if you wait until that last possible moment, what happens?
You might not get it, or the price is
You might,
absurdly
yeah,
high.
the price might be obscenely high. You might not even be on the plane, or you'll be definitely in a middle seat in the back of the plane, which will be a miserable experience. The last responsible moment, I don't know for all of you, I love to travel. So I found that the last responsible moment is about 2 weeks before you travel, after which the plane prices go way up. Now, I could have booked the plane ticket 6 months in advance, but 6 months in advance, my plans might change. The plane might no longer be in service, etc., etc., etc. COVID might happen. So I don't want to be too far in advance, but I don't want to be too late either. So finding that right time helps. Enable flow. Optimize, don't maximize. What happens? I don't know where you all live, or some of you live in DC, so you might recognize the traffic here. So what happens when we have a lot of things going on? Nothing moves. How do you create just the right amount of things so that things keep flowing? And Kanban really helps you get to that place where you can have this kind of a system where things are actually moving and exiting versus becoming stuck. So focus on a few things at a time, limit work in progress, stop starting, start finishing, and actually allow slack. And the slack gives you that opportunity to flow things. Number 8, coordinate at a regular cadence. This really comes from Scrum framework. Get together as a team and talk about how you're moving things along. What are you planning to work on? What's stuck? So that you can get things moving and flowing and keep everybody informed. And then last but not least, invest in continuous improvement, which is what you're doing this morning in terms of just this class. Just regularly talk about what went well, what can take us to the next level, and then what actions can we agree on. So regular retrospectives and figure out how might we eliminate wasteful work, improve quality, establish a sustainable pace, shorten the feedback loop. These are just some questions that you can ask. There's a ton of whatever outcomes that you're looking for. Little improvements towards that outcome make a huge difference. And you don't have to do a lot at a time. One little change, but consistently adjusting makes a difference. So from all the stuff that you heard, what are the top 3 essential Agile areas do you think would have the biggest impact on your company right now? Top 3. So the code here is 47323001. Do you all want all of it or you want none of them?
I don't know about others, but I submitted ones and I don't know if it's updating.
Yeah, same here.
Oh,
Same for me,
really?
yeah.
Ah, let me see. I might have the wrong. Let's see. Number. Oh, so for whatever reason, thank you for telling me that. And it was good because that way you weren't influenced by other people. So we see there's a couple that are getting some, gravity points. Be intentional about priorities. Optimize, don't maximize. And the next one is make work visible. I'll share this with you all because this might be a good. You created your first backlog, a prioritized backlog from all of you on where to focus next. So
If
it looks
that's
like
correct.
well, you can do another assessment.
Right? If it's correct, it's like democracy, is a good thing. But like, I think number one, be intentional about priorities. That's what we're working on right now. And that's definitely the biggest area. But make work visible. I think we do make visible. I think the production team has a wonderful job of Asana and Forecast and their Kanban models and optimize, like enable flow and stuff. Personally, I think 1, 2, and 3 are really, really important.
Yeah. Well, you all can have a conversation. This was a very quick discussion, but it's helpful to start with this anonymous kind of poll to then stimulate a conversation. What did others see? Why did they pick something over something else? Maybe they felt like this is where we need to focus because we're already good at these other things. We want to keep them, but we want to build in some other areas. Who knows? But you'll have to follow that up with the conversation. But let's open it up for a few questions before we close, but because that's where I landed with our session today. So what questions do you have? You can just get off of mute and ask away.
How do we best deal with competing priorities, sort of like bottlenecks when things are coming through, right? Like one of the things that organizations can have are different teams with different priorities, but their timelines are the same. And what would you?
And the same people are working on both.
Yeah, if the production team is working on multiple projects and a project management team or scrum masters are having difficulty getting their projects out the door through those people, right? Like I've this week been in that spot a few times. I know it's common for some of us. How do we best handle that? Like those conversations.
So number one, when you make work visible and you have that board and you see everything is stuck there, if you have WIP limits, guess what? Your whole system will get stuck. So say you have a WIP limit on production, and what can be in production is 3 items. Okay, 3 items are already there. The next step before production gets filled, then the next step gets filled, and your whole pipeline is going to get stuck if you respect WIP limits. So what are you going to do as an organization? What are you going to do? Are you going to just sit down and twiddle your thumbs?
I'm excited because, Tracy and I have been working along with production team, but really Mike, Tracy, and I have been working a lot because Tracy is the head of production, thus bringing you in. And we've been really thinking about the Agile method, how it works, not only on our projects, but for something I think you shed light on in a big way about the totality of the framework for how we operate. And we had a meeting this morning where we went through like a process strategy. And a lot of the things you were talking about were worked in there. And I also think that some of the things you talked about can be worked in there even further. And so I think also the way the team answered the question, right? Our lowest was like the resourcing prioritization. Like we're pretty much all on board, right? We know what our major challenge is and how we use Agile, Scrum, and this framework to master that challenge, to overcome it. I'm impressed not only with your presentation, but also with our team and our alignment on what those challenges are.
Yeah. But thank you. Thank you for bringing that perspective in and recognizing how this might be able to benefit your organization. But I want to go back to answering Anthony's question. I don't want to leave him hanging. So Anthony, once you make the work visible and you see a bottleneck, now you can do something about it. And that something might be, we need more people in production so that we can actually up our WIP limit. Or everybody swarms to help production get the thing out the door so you can get the thing flowing again. Right? Or you're taking on too much. How do we flow things through? So what Agile does is it's like a mirror, and it shows you what's wrong and where it might be where you want to pay attention. But then you have to use your human creativity and ingenuity, and you can use some of these techniques to figure out what experiment can be run to help us alleviate this problem. And so Scrum is not going to help you solve when things get stuck in production. You taking action on you noticing things get stuck in production will make the difference. So I see some things about voting and how you make decisions in your organizations. Agile has a lot of different ways to have democratized decision making, and noticing which require democratized decision making and which are a tell, like this is the way it's going to be, and having clear, transparent conversations about these kinds of things we're going to decide as a democracy. These kinds of things we're going to do majority vote. This kind of thing is going to be a tell. Also helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we've done a lot of survey internally for our team. I think that's a great way to start that. Just thinking about, we were thinking about just monitoring projects, like how's the client? How is the teamwork and collaboration? How is the resourcing and ability to provide context without constant switching? Those things would be extremely valuable to have for us to talk about as a team. As we go to clients, that's where it becomes political to a degree, because as I said, like, you could have 20 stakeholders on a call voting on branding and ideas and how things work, and then just one stakeholder is like truly matters, right? So we want to make sure that we do it in a way where we're accounting for the political realities that exist, and we're not shooting ourselves in the foot because we're uniting a crowd around against the leader.
Yeah. But you can be very transparent about that. You can just say, I am taking your input to consider our decision. And we know stakeholder ABC will have a higher weight because of whatever reason. If you're transparent, imagine how the feeling in that group, because you're not just what do you call it? What's the word for it? Like saying these things or getting their input just for the sake of it or making them to make them feel good. You are going to take their input into consideration, but with a factor. And that we're not making this decision based on majority. I am consulting with you on your input, and I'm going to use that information to make my decision. If you're clear on that, not a problem. But if you say this is going to be a democracy, and then you go do something that is not what the vote shows, then you'll have anarchy. Right? So transparency, inspection, adaptation. Transparency, inspection, adaptation. All right, one more question, and then I'll close.
The Electoral College.
Let's not go there. No politics, no religion. One more question.
So one of the things that we have done on a very software heavy project is looked at story points versus hours estimates. I wonder if you could touch on story points versus hours in terms of determining capacity and retros and all that.
Okay.
Just briefly.
So let me see what I can do. Yeah, what I can do in 2 minutes, because this is one that so many people struggle with. And Tracy did ask for this. I said, I cannot teach that without context, and I cannot teach that in a few minutes. So I will give you a little taste, and then we can, if you are interested, have another session around that.
Yeah. It's a big concept that's like hard to wrap your head around.
I'm currently working with the groups that I'm working with. At the moment, that's where we are at, and I thought it was just going to be 1 or 2 sessions, and it's like, a few sessions. Okay, especially because there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen here. So I'm going to actually ask you all in the chat. I want you to think of an orange and think of a watermelon. Okay, how much bigger is the watermelon compared to an orange? Just put it in the chat. Don't hit enter until I say go. How would you answer the question? How much bigger is a watermelon compared to an orange? All right, Patrick. Wait. Okay, now go, because we already have a few. So 10 times, 15 times, 50 times, 8 times, 6 times, 15 times, 4 times. Okay. Approximately 2.2 times on average. Wow. Math. And there's a lot of factors here. Okay. So based on what you all just shared, what can we conclude about the question that I asked you?
It's hard to estimate things that are kind of abstracted like that.
Yeah, so some abstract stuff is a little bit hard to estimate, but y'all all there was a commonality in everything, all of the answers, except cheater, and there's a lot of factors here.
I think it's defining what size means.
Defining what size means, but y'all all were clear about something about the orange versus the watermelon. Did everybody think that the watermelon is bigger than the orange? Much bigger than the orange? And if I give you something else in between, maybe you'd have a little more reference, relatedness to say, yeah, the watermelon is much bigger than the orange. Now, some of us in the US now have the personal watermelon, and maybe you're thinking about chopped up watermelon, but we're kind of just thinking about a general picnic watermelon. But we know picnic watermelon, huge compared to the orange. So we have our human ability to be able to do this relative sizing much more easily than if I had asked you, what is the weight of the orange versus the weight of the watermelon? To give me that answer, you'd have asked me a lot more questions, and I would have to be very, very, very specific about the orange and the watermelon for you to give me that answer. And it would probably take you a while. So with Agile, we use our ability to do these things called relative estimations, like you did with the orange and the watermelon, to be able to see, can we use that ability that we have as humans to be able to answer some important questions, like, can I prioritize based on how big this item is? Can I forecast how long this is going to take or how much it's going to cost? Can I figure out how much can I take in the next time I do my work so that it's sustainable? Those are important questions, right? Can I answer those questions with this ability that we have to do relative estimation when we don't know a lot? That is what we use for story points. So very quickly, when we think about estimation, we're just thinking about how do we make it simple and how do we make it quick? Because no matter how much time we spend on something, we're not going to get very accurate. An estimate is a guess. So we use relative estimation, and we instead of using just t-shirt sizes as a bucket, we use numbers that are just like saying small, extra large, large, etc. We just give it a number system so that we can do some math. And that's the number system we use is Fibonacci. That's what they're called story points. They're unitless. They have no relationship to time, except in hindsight. So in hindsight, you might realize, oh, we did these 3s, and every time we did a 3, it took us somewhere between 2 and 5 days. So when we look back, we can attribute some correlation to these numbers and time, but not forward looking. And we use that to be able to answer all those questions about priorities, forecasting, etc. That is a little precursor to, if you want to have me back, I will do a bunch of sessions, or at least one really deep session on this. So as we leave, I want to tell you, I know that I shared a lot of information. As you know, the secret to getting ahead is getting started. And the secret to getting started is breaking up this huge complex thing that we just shared that's overwhelming into small, manageable tasks, and start with the first one. And thank you for your time. Thank you, Tracy, for inviting me. I really enjoyed having this conversation with all of you. Hopefully next time it's more of an exchange and less of me being a sage on the stage. I do not like that, but it was lovely that we still had a conversation.
We really enjoyed it, Angelis. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Unfortunately, we all have a hard stop right now, and we all have to jump.
I sensed.
If you could send this recording to me, that'd be fabulous. Okay? Absolutely. Thank you. And
have an awesome whatever y'all are doing next, which hopefully is a lot of fun.
It is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.